Hello. It is that time of the month again. Yep, not that time of the month, jeez. But it's time for this month's book review with Junia. As you all know, Junia is wonderful. And she puts up with me. And she has agreed to do these book readings. Now, this episode's coming out just a little bit later than we normally would have had it. That has to do with some, as addressed later in the episode, some health stuff that was going on with me, and it kind of put our recording out. But today we are talking All-Star Superman. Now, one of the good things about doing this with Junia is because she's familiar with the character a lot from me, but her own knowledge, and by picking these books, we get kind of a good view of what someone who has some basic Superman knowledge gets out of these books. Because how many times as fans are we offered, or not offered, we are asked, if you were going to give someone one Superman book to read, what would it be? And that's kind of where I went with the books that I chose. Last month, she read Action Comics 1, which was easy. It was a one issue. But this one's a little much. But I am sitting here next to the lovely Junia in our matching Superman t-shirts. Hello, Junia.
Hello, Tyler.
So let's get into talking about All-Star. What, just as an overall, how did you feel reading the book?
So there's definitely some unique factors to it. But then there were a lot of familiar things as well. Things that I guess that I've heard about, or I've seen in the movies, or I've connected with the character in the past. I liked having to experience, the origin story, I guess, again, in a different way with Superman. And, also still getting connected to, I guess, the heart of who he is. So overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm excited to see what else we're going to be reading and getting into, because I feel like there's a lot more to the character than what we received in this compilation of stories, if you will. So,
All right.
okay, summary.
That is okay. That is your summary, and I'm sitting here. Bear with me. This is a new microphone I got, and just trying to adjust some things on it. Jeez. Make sure we're getting the best we can.
I have to say, like, right off the bat, if it's okay if I start sharing a little bit more. One of my favorite aspects of the comics, or the graphic novel here, is actually Clark's appearance. I know that sounds kind of very minimal. But I really loved his frumpy, like, demeanor, his clothes and stuff, which I've seen before, but not, I guess, to the extent that I see here. At one point in time, Luther even, like, chuckles at him and calls him, like, a little pudgy or overweight, and tells him that if he got in the gym and he actually, like, lost some pounds, like, he'd probably be a halfway decent looking guy, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it made me laugh because you see it in the comics, you see it in the movies sometimes. I say the movies, I'm talking about all media. I'm not just talking about the movie.
Well, I mean, this is something that we talked about recently in our Clark Kent rankings is, they pointed out, the guys, that Kirk Allen did a really good job of having a suit on that looked a little bit bigger for him than his body.
I think it's a great way of disguising. I think it's a good way of I guess, brushing that part of yourself off and trying to hide it,
But I mean, I mean to fumble on your
No,
work there.
it's okay. Go ahead.
That was one of my biggest issues with Henry Cavill's Clark in BVS, is they tailor like his outfits to him.
Yeah.
When even as Clark, he looked like a chiseled, ripped dude.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Flannel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his Clark was literally like he takes off the glasses. That's it. Okay. Yeah. Like, so I like that. I mean, I've said before, you know, with All Stars, one of those. I like it, but I'm not in love with it like some people are. But I like the Clark Kent stuff. Like, I like the one where I told you of Clark Kent where he's, like, walking here.
He bumps into a guy and he's actually, like, helping him.
Yeah. Like, I think it's in... Is it in issue 1? Like,
I don't... Okay.
First of all, I love the opening page. I love the opening page of just the 4 panels, like, kind of telling his story.
I mean, the artwork in this is beautiful.
The Frank Quietly artwork is... wonderful.
It's beautiful. And there are beautiful aspects that are here. There are some things too that just feel like, I guess, a little bit above my pay grade, if you will, like that are kind of out there a little bit more, because there's a lot of extraterrestrial kind of vibes going on in this graphic novel. It's chock full of that. And then you have Lex stuff sprinkled in, you know? So sometimes the extraterrestrial stuff is just a little bit, like, not my thing. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense.
I love the whole, like, sun aspect of things. That's not what I'm talking about. It's the other stuff that's just...
You know, it's... And this book has been said it's a love letter to the Silver Age. You know, but in the first...
Silver Age being...
Like the 60s into like the...
60s and...
The 70s where it's more sci-fi. When the comics... Because the birth of the Silver Age is defined in the late 50s. Forgive me when I can't think of everything at the moment. But it was the new Flash and the new Green Lantern. So this is when we got Barry Allen and Hal Jordan coming in more science fiction based. Than before, and that's really what got the sci-fi era of the Silver Age. But yeah, like Clark here in the first, you know, where he helps the guy by bumping into him, and the thing falls off the train that doesn't hurt him, and
the dude gets like pissed at him, but he's like, he's doing his thing. He's seeing things.
You know, he saves the kid. See, I like that. That's my kind of Clark. Like, you know.
And Lois irritates me a little bit. Here and there too, and maybe that's just a part of her characterization in general. But
it's also
I like Lois normally. So.
I do too, and I think part of it's the hard part is this is a self-contained book, so there really is no before or after.
No.
So like you kind of are dropping in. So you really, you know, this Lois where they have the. The dinner and everything.
Right, where it's her birthday and like...
He's like wearing the Kryptonian wear, which is basically like he's wearing a hood.
Right.
You know?
And where she's like, you're not Clark Kent. You know? That stuff just kind of annoys me. Like, she can't believe it.
Where she gets paranoid.
I don't know how she can't believe it.
Well, like she gets paranoid and then he presents her with the costume for her to be Superwoman.
Her costume's awesome. I don't understand the belt thing quite as much, but, you know.
Yeah, I was...
her costume's very cool looking.
You know, the elixir he makes and gives her is awesome. And then you know, I love Jimmy's signal watch here. Like, it straight up is a super watch.
He looks like a fanboy. I just love it. But I feel like Jimmy, to the naked eye, to people who don't know his connection, obviously, with Clark, with Superman... you know, that he would look like a fanboy to people on the outside. So I think it's kind of, I guess, cute, you know?
You know, I always like this, and they did this kind of in Smallville in a way with the idea that Lois gets powers to kind of really understand what it is that Clark goes through.
Yeah.
It's one of the better episodes of season 10 of Smallville.
But I do feel like there are certain, and maybe this is just because we're, you know, reading comics, but I do feel like there are certain things here, like, that are created in the stories that are left hanging, and that we don't really get closure with, and then we're bouncing into the next story, but it takes you a minute. It almost jars you. Because you're like, okay, well, where are we now? You know what I mean? It's not as fluid because we're not closing things up. Mm-hmm. We're not tying them in a bow at the end.
Like in the first issue, we're kind of going a little issue by issue. You had the bioelectricity of Superman's aura that he used and pushed, and
Yeah, that was cool.
And then this whole thing right here with the time travelers of Samson and
that's where we get some confusing stuff there. Yeah.
Like,
what's his? Is it Atlas?
Is it Atlas?
I think it's Atlas and Samson. I'm fairly certain because he tries to get Lois, and he's like talking to her like being a woman of Atlas or something like that. So yeah, they both are like trying to flirt with her, I guess. I don't know. It just feels like
it's weird.
A lot in a very small space. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I would prefer the story to focus on her. Like, I don't like this part with them fighting the beast from the center of the earth, and then...
See, I actually kind of think the beasts from the center of the earth are kind of cool. And that would be an interesting thing to, like, dive into. But I know nothing about it, really. Other than the fact that, Superman somehow creates connection with them, and they, like, have, a relationship and an understanding. So, like, when he meets up with, I think, like, the leader of the center of the earth beings, he's like, oh, I'm sorry this happened, basically. Like, and they're apologizing to each other and talking about, like, how to keep the peace, basically. I would love to know more about that. I think that's more interesting than Atlas and Samson.
If I could do one thing, I would cut the whole Atlas and Samson thing completely.
It's too much.
I hate it because, first, I have a weird thing about certain, like, mythology people. Like Samson, they're definitely just making it Hebrew mythology, like, from the Bible.
Right, straight up.
Which is fine. Because he even says, thank Yahweh.
He does, yes.
And I'm like, okay, but, like, to me... All right, it's like we recently read an issue of Superman comics where Superman and Wonder Woman met up with Thor. Okay? Mm-hmm. And yes, they're Greek mythology and everyone has them. But it's like, when you think of like Greek mythology, you kind of think DC. When you think of Norse mythology, you think of Marvel. So it's always...
You said Thor and then Greek mythology. It's Norse mythology.
Right. So they met Thor.
Okay.
As I said, it confused me for a second. But when you think of like different mythologies, you think of Greek.
Right.
You think of DC because Wonder Woman's so tied to it.
True.
When you think of Norse, you think of Marvel. Because you have Thor. And that's why, like, at the end of Thor Love and Thunder, one of the big things was we saw Marvel's version of Hercules played by Brett Goldstein for like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And it always was one of those like, things to me. Because the thing with Norse mythology, until I think Marvel and Thor, it's always kind of been there, and it's really a lot, but I don't think it's well known as Greek mythology.
Correct.
So when they do a lot of these mythological characters, I'm just kind of like, I don't know.
It's more well known now than it's ever been, but yeah.
To me, and I feel like you do the issue here. Like, I love the artwork of Superman and Lois on the moon right here.
Oh, kissing, yep. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
But you spend your entire time on the issue of her being Superwoman with her doing nothing with superpowers.
We see more about Samson and Atlas than we do anything with her actual powers. And
I would have liked a whole we could, if we cut them out, kept the creatures from the center of the earth, and it's Superman and Lois dealing with them together.
So if I'm honest here, if I'm very honest, I'm really trying not to come from like any kind of no political standpoints or whatever, but it almost feels like in that episode in particular, they're trying to downplay her. And it might be like a subconscious thing, but it just, like, we don't want a woman to actually show him, like, power in here. I don't think it's necessarily a conscious thing, but we have subconscious biases we don't always realize.
We do. And I'm just thinking, like, I don't see Grant Morrison as that type of writer, But maybe. But it makes me
But
mad.
maybe in this time frame he was. Or anyway.
It makes me mad because you introduced this fantastical element of Lois getting powers, and then she never really gets to experience much of those powers.
The thing that I feel like I'm going to say about All-Star Superman is that it totally underplays her character in general.
I think it does. So what do you think? The next one, Jimmy, what do you think of this one?
I love Jimmy. I'm trying to understand the outfit and Jimmy's position.
We meet this brand new character, the Dr. Quanta,
yeah,
right here, this guy, that plays a large role in this. And it's, like I said, it's very self-contained, so it's like you're getting...
This is where I was like getting like, okay, what am I being dropped into? Because it felt like we shifted gears entirely. Like we did a whole 180 and I don't even know where we're at. So,
but the Jimmy turning into like Doomsday here is pretty, and I like
I thought that was cool.
I thought that
was cool
a lot in the sense of when you go back and you read of how many, like, there's one where Jimmy got turned into a turtle in the 60s during the Silver Age. We just read about how he turned basically into Mr. Fantastic in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So it's like the idea of something happening to poor Jimmy and him getting turned into something, and in this case it's Doomsday.
This whole run right here is very humorous to me because you're bringing that up. But, like, it's almost like all bets are off with this series or with this compilation of stories because, like, everybody turns into something or has the ability to like, shift into something. Like, Lois shifts into
the Superwoman.
The Superwoman. Then we have... Jimmy who shifts into Doomsday. Then we have Lex who shifts into a version of Super Lex. There's all of these elements that are like everybody's like trying to be like Superman. Mm-hmm. And really what to me it does, I'm a weirdo in this situation that I don't like when we have characters that are supposed to be stronger or just as strong as Superman. And I think it irritates me in a way because, and I'm not talking about like villains. Like we gotta have the Doomsday. I get that. There's always an opposite, right? Mm-hmm. There always has to be an opposite energy. But I think sometimes I get a little irritated, and this feels like this whole graphic novel is chock full of that. It's chock full of these different characters who are just as strong, if not stronger, in some ways than Superman is.
It's an interesting thought.
Until the end, of course, because the end shifts.
Now, this one, the gospel according to Lex Luthor part. It's probably my favorite, just because I feel like this is because it's mainly Clark interacting with Lex, and I feel like I like this presentation of Lex. This is where we get him like exercising, talking about real American muscle.
But honestly, out of all of the stories that we go through in this graphic novel, it's the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah. And
the reason why it makes the most sense is because we're not trying to... There's nothing puffed up here. There's no fluff.
Yeah,
that's the
most
word
grounded.
I'm using.
Even with Parasite.
Yeah.
Which even makes sense, and it feels like it connects more to the rest of the story.
Yeah, but Parasite is very minimal in the background almost here. Mm-hmm. And it's more about Lex showing off and showing Clark how he's coming into power and all of this jazz. It's, he's peacocking basically the whole time, and we get to see, Clark be Clark.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool because it's a different perspective than the rest of the graphic novel. It's
fun when it's Clark stuck in a situation where Clark can't turn into Superman, but he's still got to do stuff.
Yeah, because we all know. We all are sitting here like, yeah, he can take you in 2 seconds and we're laughing about it as we're reading. But like, I don't know. It's not as complicated or convoluted as everything else.
Convolution is a term that I use a lot for comic books because I feel like some writers get so deep in convolution and lore, like, and this is, I think, a translation of the medium because, I talked about recently on a podcast the Death of Superman film where Peter J. Tomasi, who is a comic book writer, a very good comic book writer, wrote the screenplay, and he took the base elements of the story and he made it more simplistic. He streamlined the Death of Superman storyline towards a very good, well-presented material compared to sometimes where it's very convoluted. But
well, one of the things that I feel like I want to say is I can understand why diehard Superman fans out there who read the comics regularly and all that jazz or have been reading it for years, if you were to say to me, All-Star Superman is the comic or the graphic novel that you need to read in order to connect with the character, I can understand why you guys would have that perspective.
I don't.
But I get it. I get it because if you read through it, it's almost like an explosion of all of these different exciting things that Superman faces, and even the challenges that Superman goes through. But there's, for me as somebody who is new to reading Superman, like, this was a lot. And I think that a much simpler story that actually spoke on the character more than the bombastic energy of this graphic novel would have suited me better for my first, handful of readings. This is something that I feel like as a diehard Superman fan, you would probably read down the line. But I wouldn't want this as my first thing.
Thank you. I mean,
as my second thing, it's a lot. It's a lot to read because I'm trying to catch up, and I know things about Superman before I even tap into this. So,
and that's the thing is, I feel like it is such a love letter to an era, but it's a very disorganized, yet
it's a good way of disorganized, yeah.
But yet it makes sense at the same time.
Yeah.
All right, the next chapter is where he's back in Smallville with Paul. We see Crypto. It's called Funeral in Smallville.
Yeah, and we have people coming in from the future, basically. A team of supermen who come in disguise on the Kent farm to help harvest some crops.
And
it's very interesting.
Yeah, even the fifth dimensional imp, and we have one in the bandages and everything. And then it's interesting because it's basically
the death of Pa.
Yeah, it's the death of Pa, and it's an interesting way that Pa goes here.
And Clark actually gets to have the ability to talk to Pa before he dies. Because what you realize is the man in the bandages is actually Clark.
Yeah. I was looking for
which is powerful. And to be honest with you, I must say it again, Tyler. I really wish that it was a more simplified story. Because there are profound parts here that I feel like I had to, I'm a quick reader for the most part. But I had to go back over it a couple of times just to make sure that not that I understood what was happening, but that I got the gravity of what was happening.
Right.
That I connected to it, So I feel like maybe if it was a little bit slower paced, maybe if we stripped down a couple of things, that we might actually be able to connect to the story a little bit deeper. I know I sound like I'm poo-pooing it,
No,
but I'm
no.
really not.
No,
I'm
because
just
this is a lot of the same stuff that I've said about it. Because there's parts of it where I'm like, oh, that's
it's not bad at
it's
all.
just you,
It's
you
just
took a very hard way of getting there.
yeah. There are things that, as somebody who is new to this, I think that they could be better explained or better expressed. And I'm all about the depth of characters anyway. That's why I want to stay around and read something or stay around and watch something, is because I want to see, or I'm connected to the character itself. You know, that's why even when Supernatural was having bad writing after a while, I still stuck it out, because it's just like...
Because you fell in love with the character.
Yeah, exactly. So if I can't connect with the heart of a character when I'm reading something, then I'm going to be a little bit, I guess judgy about it.
So, the Bizarro section is my least favorite. Because, one, I cannot take reading a bunch of Bizarro speak. It gives me a headache. So being Bizarro is, it says episode 7. Then episode 8 is Us to Do Opposite, where he's in, Bizarro land and he meets Zimbaro. And it's heartbreaking about, who he is in his life. But I just can't do it.
Yeah.
The backwardsness and it's so just, after a while it's just too much. And the thing with this is, later on this year for our Patreon, we will be watching the animated All-Star movie. Okay? And I thought about lining it up so you read this and saw the movie, but I wanted you to read this before the new Superman film, because there was supposed to be inspiration from this, and he used this imagery before they created their own.
That's cool.
In the film. So I wanted you to have this under your belt.
Okay.
And then with the other films and stuff. But I say all that because the animated film completely ejects all the Bizarro stuff.
Okay.
And the animated film was written by the late, great Dwayne McDuffie, sorry. I'm running slow here. So the man knows his stuff and he knows what he's doing. Dwayne McDuffie, Junia, if you don't remember, we talked about. He was one of the African Americans who founded Milestone Comics in the 90s, the all-black comic company that eventually merged into Image Comics.
Oh, that's
They
awesome.
created Static Shock, who's just Static.
Shock, yep. Mm-hmm.
Who just went to Static, and Icon. You've seen Icon and Young Justice and stuff.
Right. Yep, I have.
So that was Dwayne McDuffie who created that.
That's so cool.
And he wrote for the animated stuff, like TV shows as well.
That's beautiful.
But episode 9, Curse of the Replacement Superman.
Very interesting storyline, to be honest with you. And what's interesting about it is, immediately, like right off the bat, I just really very much so disliked the two characters that came into play here. Like, putting Superman down, basically making fun of him for not being, strong like they are, or however you want to say it. Like, and I'm not talking about physical strength.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bar-El and yeah, it's like,
but
it's like, I'm trying to remember her name.
This is what gets me, okay? With Kryptonians in a lot of ways remind me of Vulcans.
Oh, yeah.
Where in Star Trek, and in no way am I a big enough Star Trek person to really go deep into this, but I'll say, the idea that Vulcans were supposed to have no emotion removed.
Lilo.
Yes. And, they always depict Kryptonians as being this static, very much removed from their feelings, emotion as people. And everyone from Krypton who shows up who's not Jor-El, no, I don't want to say that, who's not Clark / Kal-El or Kara, pretty much is a-hole.
Well, because they see themselves as like an elevated
class of people.
Right, exactly.
So here's my question is, what drives me crazy is they talk about coming to the world, they're going to rule. if I found out and I had the ability to go, like, let's say magically, if I crossed into the next state over,
Yeah.
that we would gain superpowers and could be powerful beings. Why am I still at this state? All the times that you see things of where these Kryptonians show up and they know that they'll have powers, or they know this, why didn't Krypton just leave Krypton and invade Earth long ago, and that way everyone would have these powers to rule over the planet?
I know. Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but if I, knew that I could have powers, I wouldn't rule over people. But
I was just about to say, you're not that kind of person.
But
yeah,
I would just need to go, I'm like, I can fly. Because we all know that that's my desire is I wish I could fly.
Up and away.
But it just boggles my mind. Like,
right.
And everyone shows up and their first thing is, oh, I'm now superior. I really want to, spoiler alert, I want to write a Superman story that realizes time travel and maybe Pa Kent, somebody else from Earth, goes to Krypton in the past, and under Krypton's yellow sun, they have superpowers.
That'd be really cool. That would be really cool.
So it's the reverse of now all of a sudden, Krypton has a Superman who is actually an Earthling. And it's like the whole reverse story.
That wouldn't be hard to do at all, like in a different dimension or something like that. Like, isn't that what all comic book writers do? They thrust something into a different dimension.
It was on a different Earth.
Whatever the hell we want to do.
It was on Earth. Who gives a fudge?
Right, exactly.
But I'm just saying, like, because that always drives me insane.
But I try to understand some of the storyline here and whatnot, like, Jimmy dressing up in this outfit that he dresses up in and whatnot.
The undercover brother.
He's hilarious. He's hilarious. But anyway, this is actually a really tragic story.
It is.
And it's what's beautiful about it. What I do love about this story, because it took me a second to actually really get into it. But this might be one of my other favorites, I guess, in the series. But it's the fact that that Cal teaches them basically what unconditional love looks like, if you will, or compassion.
Yeah.
And he's very real with them the whole time. He never wavers. He never wavers from the moment he meets them. Like, I actually genuinely care about you. Like, you're part of me. We are connected. Like, I care about you no matter what. And they didn't accept any of it, and they saw themselves as elevated, and here they are basically dying. And here he is trying to find a way to save them. And it's just beautiful because
they love each other too.
They do, and it's a beautiful connection between the two of them as well. But what I love about it is like you could see a shift in them because of the way that Cal treats them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's so very authentic here, and I think this might be one of the better parts of the entire series that shows us more of his character, of who he really is. So I like this one a lot.
I do too. And I like how at the end he puts them in the Phantom Zone to be the law and order of the Phantom Zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're together. I love this.
Oh, yeah.
Of the next issue, which is Never Ending.
Where he picks up the school bus and then he goes to the hospital with the freaking kids. I know.
He flies the kids to Egypt.
I have another favorite part in here, which I won't share until we get there, but...
But then we get into like him going to Kandor,
yeah, absolutely. Which is one of the things that the couple, Barrel and Lilo, were making fun of him, like, and angry with him because he never brought Kandor back to its power, basically.
I kind of always like that.
I like that.
That he can never. He's smart. He's very smart, but he can never do everything. like he couldn't figure out how to enlarge Kandor correctly.
Right.
You know, it's a tragedy. Like, and there's been some comics where he has and stuff like that, but you know, it's one of those that, for the most part, they always try to get Kandor back.
Well, in this one, he puts him in Mars.
Do you think we'll see Kandor in Superman 2025? Like, if we're in the fortress, do you think we'll get like a shot of some of the bottled?
I was about to say, if anything, it would be in the background, but it's not going to be something that's.
I'm gonna say yes.
Foreground.
I'm gonna say it's gonna be in there somewhere. There's gonna be a reference to it, with just the fact that if he's pulling from the Silver Age, we got crypto and stuff.
Well, hopefully, if they're going to build on something in the future, that could be a really cool element to have.
I think, okay, not to go down a tangent, but my pitch that I made that it's not dropped yet, that people are getting as special, on my Jonathan Tyler Patrick YouTube page where I do my requel pitches, was I think a sequel for Superman and for Supergirl would be them to team up and base it off the Brainiac attack storyline for a sequel, kind of like both films come together kind of thing. But
that's cool.
There's Jimmy as Flamebird. Ah! This page I love, okay?
Yeah,
but
I've read this before. You have literally put this page in front of my face before and said, read this.
I love this, but everyone shares this so much. And this is good about saving Reagan. Because we earlier get teased about the train a few pages back right here.
Right, where her therapist is getting caught up and stuff.
Okay? And I love this.
Yes,
it's great.
It's beautiful.
But there is nothing more beautiful. You take this emotion and maximize it by 10. That is what you get in J. Michael Straczynski's. It's collected in the Superman Grounded Volume 1.
Yeah.
But it is one of the most beautiful Superman saving somebody stories. And I'm going to cry. I'm over emotional since getting out of the hospital. Okay.
When you showed this to me before, I thought it was a part of like a larger storyline.
And that's the problem I have with it.
It's just a snapshot. Literally a snapshot here.
Keep talking. I'll be right back. Keep talking.
And it's, to me, it deserves more. It deserves better than that, because what a beautiful, heavy way of trying to save someone. And something that a lot of us actually would connect with, which I've talked to Tyler about this yesterday, about the importance of connecting with stories and with characters and seeing yourself in characters. A lot of us understand what mental health looks like and what mental health issues feel like, and how many times we wished that somebody like Superman would just fly up and basically tell us our value and ask us to keep fighting. So anyway, I think that this kind of a story needs more than one page, in my opinion. So.
Yep. I agree.
Also, too, I'm just gonna say this. I feel like we've been to a lot of comic book stores, right? A lot of comic book stores. And one of the overarching, I think, themes that we've connected to in these comic book stores, like when we're talking to the owners and whatnot, they'll say stuff about wishing the younger generation would get more involved in comics. I wish the younger generation would get more involved in comics. Well, how often are we writing and promoting stories that connect with the younger generation? Because, so, I don't know if you know this, but like in my marketing classes and stuff that I have taken, I've studied a lot on like demographics and what you would call, what are we? We're millennials, so the one that's right next to us, I'm sorry.
Zoomers?
Yeah, Zoomers. Our Gen Zers are actually the generation that you would almost call like the resistance generation or whatever. They're the ones that are more politically minded. They go for social issues. They go for like, mental health issues and stuff like that. They're kind of our activists, if you will. So just speaking from that perspective, if we actually wanted to get the younger generations or the next generations involved in these stories and carrying on, the legacies, then we want to write stories that are going to speak, write, and promote, being the key word here. Stories that are going to resonate with them. And this is a story right here with Reagan that would resonate with them.
And I think that's probably what makes me mad is it gets undersold because it is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 beautifully powerful panels.
Yeah.
But there's so much more that can be done. Mm-hmm. And then we step back into the fantastical elements.
I know you weren't asking me about how we can get the next generation involved, but
see, we talk about all this interdimension, and then he talked about the cube in realities and stuff, and then and then we tease that like there's the world out there that kind of is creating Superman. Mm-hmm. Like there's Jerry, it's cute, and Joe.
Very good, cute.
And the whole and the thing about this, like in a lot of ways, like here we have where they try to execute Lex Luthor,
right?
And I've said this multiple times. I feel like so many times the only stories of Superman that people care about are Superman's death. And this is another version of Superman's death.
I was going to say the whole thing is about him dying. The whole thing is about the fact that, we didn't even mention this in the beginning. How the solar radiation poisoning happened and he's like overloaded with, solar radiation in his cells. And
so he's
slowly it's like killing his cells,
it's like
basically.
Cancer.
Yeah. Solar cancer.
Well, I mean, it's a way of giving Superman cancer, basically destroying his cells. Much like I told you, like in Joshua Williams' currently run, they gave him like the red pollution type thing or whatever. It's basically like giving Superman high blood pressure and worrying about a heart attack, and going crazy. And it's a way of just telling these stories. But he's like the strongest he's ever been because of this, and he can't. He fights the Sun Eater. I
really don't know the point of Lex's niece and all of this either.
It's it's great.
She's like one of those side characters where it's like, and maybe this is my thing. Maybe this is my thing with All-Star Superman. We spend too much time on characters that don't matter. And not enough time on the characters that do.
I agree. Because I feel like there's certain books in here that make a linear story.
Certain ones.
And then there's some that just are off, and it's kind of like chapters in a diary of Superman's last days, of him and his last trials of, like here with Luthor when he stops Lex and Lex starts to see things.
Super Lex.
Yeah, and Superman flies off to fix the sun or whatever.
And he's gone for an entire year, and Lois is like waiting around for Superman to come back, still not really believing that Clark is Superman, I don't think, but yeah.
And then, there's Jimmy Olsen with her jetpack next to Lois, talking about looking up in the sun. He's up there fixing it. Then probably someone in this crowd shots, Chris Daughtry writing Waiting for Superman.
Waiting for
Superman. And then it ends, he with that idea he's now Superman 1,000, and then the idea of the Superman project, and it's like Superman, it's like a 2.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, where are they going with this? Because there's nothing really before or after this. It's just continuity.
And it's excess. I think overall All-Star Superman is enjoyable. But I think there's a lot of excess in here that does not need to be present, such as Samson and Atlas, such as Lex's niece that I can't say her name, and other little elements that I feel like take away from the storyline that's trying to come through, which is really Superman's death and rebirth.
Yeah.
And another version of his death and rebirth, if you will. So.
What would you rate it out of 10?
A 7.
Okay. I like a 10-point scale. Some people like 5, but then I feel like a lot of things just become 3s. I think it's too small of a scale of rating on an opinion.
Way too small of a scale.
Like 4 stars, 5 stars, whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay. I like a 10-point scale. I'm an IMDb person.
No, this is definitely a 7 for me. I feel like there's a lot of positives. I enjoyed it. It wasn't something that I was like, dear God, do I have to keep reading this? There were parts to it where I was like,
but it's not a page turner. It's not like, oh my God, I'm loving everything I'm reading so much. I can't put it down. I can't.
Right, and I'm a reader. I love to read.
Oh, she is.
So
she is always in a book
somewhere. Yes.
Either a physical book or a digital book or an audio book, just depending on what she's got going on.
Yeah.
She loves her stories.
So yeah, I love being in different worlds.
Well, Junia, thank you for going through All Star.
Yeah.
Next month, I think you're going to enjoy. It's a special one for me that I love. I can't wait for you to dive into that one. And now you get to hear the rest of this episode with James and me talking. If you're listening to this on YouTube, check out the episode that's side by itself. Until next time, I'm Tyler, the Superman of Blue, the man of tomorrow, with my lovely wife, Junia, the superwoman of everything.